This will be mini-series of employee stories who worked at gas station at Route 66. I will tell them until workers run out of stories or until they mysteriously disappear. Enjoy. I never thought I'd end up here, slinging coffee and cigarettes at a rundown gas station off Route 66. But life has a way of grinding you down until you're just another shadow in the neon glow. The place is called The Last Stop, though the sign's been flickering for years, half the letters burned out like forgotten promises. I work the night shift from dusk till dawn, alone in that concrete box surrounded by endless desert. The highway stretches out like a black vein through the sand, and most nights it's quiet enough to hear the wind whispering secrets through the cracks in the door. But the customers, they're not right. They've never been right, not since I started 6 months ago, and not in the stories I've heard from the old-timers who pass through, the ones who warn you about this stretch of road. Started with the tales, you know. Truckers pulling in for a fill-up, their eyes hollow from too many miles, muttering about the previous incidents at stations just like this one up and down Route 66. They'd lean on the counter, fingers stained with oil and regret, and spin yarns about drivers vanishing into the night, or pumps that dispensed something thicker than gasoline, something that smelled like copper and decay. One guy, a grizzled vet with a scar splitting his lip, told me about a station 50 miles east where the attendant found a customer skinned alive in the bathroom, the flesh peeled off in neat strips like wrapping paper, left hanging on the towel rack. He said it happened back in the 80s, but the cops hushed it up, blamed it on coyotes or some nonsense. Another story from further west. A family pulled in late one night. Mom, dad, 2 kids, and by morning, only the car remained, doors wide open, seats soaked in blood that had congealed into patterns like twisted faces screaming silently. Those stories linked together like chain links on a fence, each one pulling you deeper into the myth of Route 66 as a cursed artery, where the road eats the weak and spits out bones. I laughed them off at first. Figured it was just road lore, the kind of bullshit that keeps you awake on long hauls. But then the weirdness started creeping in on my shifts, subtle at first, like the way the fluorescent lights buzz louder after midnight, or how the security cameras glitch out, showing static that almost looks like figures moving in the lot. I'd chalk it up to faulty wiring, but deep down, I knew better. The customers were the real giveaway. Normal folks don't come through here after dark. The day crowd is fine, tourists snapping photos of the vintage pumps, families grabbing snacks for the drive. But night brings the others, the ones who slink in from the shadows, their eyes reflecting the red glow of the exit sign like animals caught in headlights. My first real encounter happened about a week in. I was restocking the shelves, the radio droning some static-laced country tune, when the bell above the door chimed. In walked this guy, tall and gaunt, wearing a coat that hung off him like it was made for someone twice his size. His skin was pale, almost translucent, veins bulging blue against the white. He didn't say a word, just shuffled to the cooler and grabbed a bottle of water, then stood there staring at the label for what felt like minutes. When he finally approached the counter, I noticed his hands, fingers elongated, nails chipped and black like he'd been digging in dirt. He paid with crumpled bills that felt greasy, and as I handed him change, his sleeve rode up, revealing a tattoo that wasn't ink but scars, carved deep into the flesh, swirling patterns that made my stomach twist. He smiled then, teeth yellow and uneven, and whispered, "The road remembers." I blinked and he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. Outside, no car, no footsteps, just the empty lot under the moon. That night rattled me, but I shook it off. Bills don't pay themselves, right? The next few shifts were uneventful, save for the occasional drifter buying lottery tickets with shaking hands. But the stories kept echoing in my head, linking back to those older tales. I'd heard one about a station attendant who saw customers that looked like his dead relatives, their faces rotting but voices pleading for help. Another where the pump started bleeding, thick red sludge oozing out instead of fuel. And when the mechanic checked, he found chunks of meat clogging the lines. Human meat, chewed and mangled. Those accounts were whispered in truck stops, passed down like heirlooms of horror, and now here I was, living in the sequel, Things escalated on a night when the wind howled like a wounded beast. The power flickered, plunging the station into brief darkness before the backups kicked in. I was behind the counter nursing a lukewarm coffee when a van pulled up. Old, rusted windows tinted so black I couldn't see inside. The driver door creaked open, and out stepped a woman, or what I thought was a woman. She moved with a jerky gait, like her joints were rusted hinges, dress hanging in tatters, stained with dark patches that could have been mud or something worse. Her hair was matted, falling over her face in greasy strands. She pumped gas first, the hose trembling in her grip, and I watched from the window as she whispered to the pump, her lips moving in silent conversation. When she came inside, the smell hit me. Rotting meat mixed with sulfur, so thick it coated my throat. She browsed the aisles, picking up candy bars and squeezing them until the wrappers burst, chocolate oozing between her fingers like pus. At the counter, she dumped a pile of snacks, and as I rang them up, she lifted her head. Her face, God, her face. Skin sagging like melted wax, one eye milky white, the other darting wildly. But the worst was her mouth, lips cracked and bleeding, stretched into a grin that showed gums receding from teeth filed to points. "Hungry," she rasped, voice like gravel scraping bone. I muttered the total, trying not to gag, and she paid with coins that were warm, almost hot, as if pulled from a fire. As she left, she paused at the door, turning back. "You hear them too, don't you? The ones under the road." I froze, but she was already gone, the van sputtering away into the night. That phrase stuck with me, linking straight back to one of those old stories. A trucker who swore he heard scratching beneath the asphalt at a Route 66 stop, like claws trying to break through. He dug a little hole once out of curiosity and found fingernails embedded in the tar. Hundreds of them, some still attached to rotting finger bones. After that, the nights blurred into a haze of unease. I'd find things out of place. A bloody handprint on the bathroom mirror that wiped away clean but left a sticky residue. Whispers from the vents that sounded like names being called. Shadows in the corners that moved when I wasn't looking. One shift, a man came in around 3, assuming that's when it was since I don't track time anymore, dressed in a suit too clean for the desert dust. He bought a map, unfolded it on the counter and pointed to spots along Route 66, murmuring about the connections. His fingers traced lines that weren't on the paper, and when I leaned closer, I saw his nails were gone. Just raw, bloody beds oozing clear fluid. He folded the map with a snap, paid, and left, but not before saying, "The stories aren't over. They're just beginning again." That comment chilled me because it felt like he knew about the legends that haunted these stations, the chain of horrors stretching back decades, like the one where an attendant found a customer eviscerated in the parking lot, guts strung out like Christmas lights, spelling words in some forgotten language, or the family van that pulled in empty, but when searched, had tiny teeth marks all over the interior, as if something small and vicious had gnawed its way through the passengers. Last week it got personal. I was mopping the floor, the fluorescent hum my only company, when the door chimed again. This time it was a kid, no more than 10, barefoot, in pajamas crusted with dirt. He wandered in, eyes wide and unblinking, and headed straight for the candy aisle. I called out, asking where his parents were, but he ignored me, grabbing handfuls of sweets and stuffing them into his pockets. When he approached the counter, I saw the bruises, purple welts covering his arms, shaped like handprints too large for a child. "They're waiting outside," he said in a monotone, voice too deep for his age. I glanced out the window, nothing but empty pumps and swirling dust. He paid with a single bill, folded neatly, but as I took it, something fell from his sleeve. A tooth, yellowed and cracked, root still bloody. I recoiled and he smiled, revealing gaps in his gums where more were missing. "The road takes pieces," he whispered, then turned and skipped out. I followed to the door, heart pounding, and watched him climb into a car that hadn't been there moments before, an old sedan idling silently. As it pulled away, I swear I saw figures in the back seat, twisted shapes pressed against the glass, mouths open in silent howls. That night I couldn't shake the image, and it tied directly into another story I'd heard. Kids appearing at Route 66 stations, luring attendants out into the dark where waiting hands dragged them under the earth. The survivors, if there were any, spoke of tunnels beneath the highway, lined with bones and echoing with cries. Now every shift feels like waiting for the next link in the chain. The customers keep coming, each one more wrong than the last, their presence a reminder that Route 66 isn't just a road, it's a graveyard disguised as asphalt. And me? I'm the fool who stays trapped in the glow of the sign, listening for the bell that signals the next horror. But tonight feels different. The wind's picking up, carrying faint scratches from below, and I can see headlights approaching in the distance. Whatever's coming, it's part of the story, and I'm afraid I'm about to become the next chapter. The headlights grew closer, slicing through the dark like a predator's eyes locking onto prey. I stood behind the counter, gripping the edge so hard my knuckles whitened, the fluorescent buzz above me drilling into my skull. The last stop felt smaller tonight, the walls pressing in, the air thick with that same sour stench of decay that lingered after the kid in the pajamas left. I'd stopped cleaning the blood off the mop after his visit. It wasn't worth it when every night brought something worse. The stories from Route 66, those whispered legends about stations like this one, kept clawing at my mind. The skinned man in the bathroom 50 miles east, the family whose blood-painted screams on their car seats, the fingernails buried in the asphalt. They weren't just tales anymore. They were warnings, and I was too stubborn or too broke to heed them. The bell above the door chimed, sharp and jarring, snapping me out of my haze. The vehicle outside was a pickup truck, old and battered, its paint chipped away to reveal rust like open wounds. The driver didn't get out right away, just sat there, engine idling, a shadow behind the cracked windshield. I squinted through the window, my breath catching as the door finally creaked open. A man stepped out, boots crunching on the gravel, his silhouette tall and hunched like he carried something heavy on his shoulders. He wore a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, and his arms glistened under the neon light, slick with something that wasn't sweat. When he pushed through the door, the smell hit me first, rancid like meat left to rot in the sun, mixed with something metallic and sharp. His face was rough, unshaven, with deep lines carved into his skin, but his eyes were the worst. They were too wide, pupils dilated to black pits, and they darted around the store before locking onto me. He didn't blink, not once, as he shuffled toward the counter, dragging one foot slightly, leaving a faint smear on the tiles. I glanced down and saw it, dark red glistening like he'd stepped in a puddle of blood. "Evening," I managed, my voice thinner than I wanted. He didn't respond, just reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled pack of smokes, the wrapper stained with fingerprints that looked too dark to be dirt. He slid it across the counter, and I noticed his hands, calloused, knuckles swollen and under his nails, something thick and black, like tar or congealed blood. "Just these?" I asked, scanning the pack, trying to keep my hand steady. He nodded, slow, deliberate, his eyes never leaving mine. "You hear it, don't you?" he said, voice low like gravel grinding under a tire. "The hum." I froze, the scanner beeping uselessly in my hand. "The hum?" I echoed, my mouth dry. I'd heard it before, late at night when the station was empty, a low vibration that seemed to come from the ground itself, like the road was breathing. It was part of the stories, too. An old trucker once told me about a station down the line where the hum drove the attendant mad, made him claw his own ears off to stop it. They found him wandering the desert, blood streaming down his neck, babbling about the voices under the blacktop. "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "Just the pipes, probably, old place like this." He didn't smile. Instead, he leaned closer, his breath hot and foul, like something crawled into his mouth and died. "It ain't pipes, it's them. They're awake tonight." He tapped the counter, his nails clicking, leaving tiny flecks of that black gunk behind. "You'll see soon enough." I handed him the cigarettes, my fingers brushing the counter where he'd touched it. The surface felt warm, sticky, and when I looked down, the flecks he'd left were moving, writhing like tiny worms before sinking into the wood. I jerked my hand back, heart hammering, but when I looked up, he was already halfway to the door, dragging that foot again, the smear on the floor thicker now, almost pulsing. "Hey," I called, not sure why, maybe just to prove I wasn't scared. "What do you mean they're awake?" He paused, one hand on the door, and turned just enough for me to see the side of his face. His cheek was sunken, like the flesh had been scooped out, and something glistened in the hollow. A wet, twitching mass that didn't belong. "Check the pumps," he said, then pushed outside, the bell clanging behind him. The truck roared to life, tires spitting gravel, and was gone before I could process what I'd seen. I stood there, the hum growing louder now, vibrating up through my boots. It wasn't just in my head anymore. The whole station seemed to thrum with it, the lights flickering in time with the pulse. "Check the pumps," he'd said. I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed to stay inside, lock the door and wait for dawn. But the stories, those damned Route 66 stories, kept looping in my mind. The pumps that bled, the meat clogging the lines, the customers who weren't customers but something else, something the road spat out to play with the living. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter, its beam weak and yellow, and stepped outside. The air was heavy, the wind carrying that same rotten smell, stronger now, mixed with something like burning hair. The pumps stood like sentinels in the lot, their hoses coiled, the nozzles glinting under the moon. I approached number 3, where the man had filled his tank, and saw it immediately. A dark stain spreading across the concrete, seeping out from the base of the pump. It wasn't oil or gas, it was too thick, too red, and it glistened like it was alive. I crouched, the hum so intense now it rattled my teeth, and shone the flashlight on the stain. It moved, rippling like water disturbed by a stone, and in the center something floated to the surface, a chunk of flesh, raw and torn, with veins still threaded through it. I gagged, stumbling back, and that's when I heard it. A wet, scraping sound like something dragging itself through the pipes. The hose twitched, jerking in its cradle, and a low gurgle came from the pump, followed by a splatter as something thick sprayed out of the nozzle, hitting the ground with a sickening slap. I scrambled to my feet, the flashlight beam shaking as I backed toward the station. The spray wasn't stopping, it was gushing now, a steady stream of dark, viscous liquid that smelled of blood and bile. Chunks splattered onto the concrete, some twitching, others dissolving into the pool. And then I saw it, in the beam of my light. A hand, pale and bloated, clawing its way out of the nozzle, fingers stretching impossibly long, nails scraping the metal as it tried to pull itself free. I ran, slamming the door behind me, my chest heaving as I fumbled for the lock. The hum was deafening now, shaking the shelves, knocking cans to the floor. The lights flickered wildly, and through the window I saw the pool spreading, creeping toward the station. The hand still writhing in the nozzle, more fingers emerging, a second hand now, clawing at the air. The stories were true. The road wasn't just cursed, it was alive and it was hungry. I grabbed the phone to call for help, but the line was dead, replaced by that same hum, now laced with whispers, names, pleas, screams. I dropped the receiver, backing against the counter, and that's when the bell chimed again. The door hadn't opened, but something was inside with me. The air grew colder, the smell of rot overwhelming, and from the corner of my eye I saw it. A shadow, too tall, too thin, moving across the aisles, its limbs bending wrong, like a spider trying to stand upright. It stopped at the edge of the counter, just out of the light, and spoke in a voice that wasn't one voice, but many, layered and screeching. "You heard us," it said. "Now you're part of it." The hum swallowed everything, and as the shadow stepped into the light, its face, or what passed for a face, grinned with too many teeth, each one dripping with the same black gunk I'd seen under the man's nails. I screamed, but the sound was lost in the noise, and outside, the pumps kept bleeding, linking me to every horror story I'd ever heard about Route 66, pulling me deeper into the road's endless gnashing maw. The shadow loomed closer, its grin splitting wider, teeth glistening like wet knives under the flickering fluorescence. The hum from the ground pulsed through my bones, syncing with my heartbeat, making my chest feel like it was caving in. I pressed myself against the counter, the edge digging into my spine. my hands scrabbling for anything to use as a weapon. A pen, a stapler, the goddamn coffee pot, but nothing felt solid enough to stop whatever this thing was. Its body, if you could call it that, was a twisted mockery of human, limbs too long, joints bending at angles that made my stomach churn. The smell was unbearable now, a mix of rotting flesh and something chemical, like gasoline left to fester. The air felt thick, like breathing through a wet rag, and the whispers from the phone receiver still echoed in my head, names and screams weaving into the hum, tying back to every Route 66 story I'd ever heard. "You're part of it," it said again, voices overlapping, some high and shrill, others deep and guttural, like a choir of the damned. Its head tilted, neck cracking with a sound like snapping twigs, and I saw its eyes, or where eyes should have been. Just empty sockets, oozing that same black tar I'd seen under the trucker's nails, dripping onto the floor where it sizzled and smoked. I wanted to scream again, but my throat was locked tight, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The thing took a step, its bare feet slapping the tiles, leaving wet prints that weren't water but something thicker, darker, pooling in the grout lines. I bolted for the back room, slamming the door behind me, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the flimsy lock. It wouldn't hold, not against that thing, but I needed a second to think, to breathe. The back room was a cramped mess. Boxes of stale chips, a broken mop, a flickering bulb that cast jagged shadows. The hum was louder here, vibrating through the walls, and I realized it wasn't just coming from the ground anymore. It was in the air, in the pipes, in the very structure of the last stop. I pressed my ear to the wall, desperate for silence, but instead I heard scratching. Faint at first, then frantic, like dozens of claws digging from the other side. The stories flashed through my mind, the tunnels under the road lined with bones, the fingernails in the asphalt, the kids who lured attendants into the dark. This wasn't new. This was the road continuing its work, and I was just the latest idiot caught in its jaws. The door rattled, a slow, deliberate knock that sent my heart into my throat. "Open it," the voices said, now so close they seemed to come from inside my skull. "You can't run from the road." I backed away, tripping over a crate, my flashlight clattering to the floor. The beam spun wildly, catching glimpses of the walls that were moving, pulsing, like the inside of a living thing. Tiny cracks formed, oozing that black tar, and in the dim light I saw shapes in it. Fingers, eyes, mouths, all writhing, trapped in the sludge. I gagged, the coffee I'd drunk earlier burning its way back up, and stumbled to the corner, curling into a ball like a kid hiding from a nightmare. But this wasn't a nightmare I could wake from. The knocking stopped, replaced by a wet, slithering sound, like something squeezing through the gap under the door. I grabbed the flashlight, its weak beam shaking in my grip, and aimed it at the threshold. A tendril of that black ooze was seeping in, slow and deliberate, pooling on the floor. It wasn't just liquid. It was alive, forming into shapes, tiny hands reaching up, clawing at the air. One of them grabbed the edge of a box, tearing through the cardboard like it was paper, and I saw a face form in the ooze. A child's face, eyes wide and pleading, mouth opening to scream but only gurgling that tar-like sludge. I scrambled to my feet, kicking at the tendril, but it clung to my boot, cold and sticky, burning my skin like acid. I yanked my leg free, the pain searing, and saw my boot was melting, the leather dissolving into a bubbling mess. The stories were screaming in my head now. The pump's bleeding meat, the family torn apart, the attendant who clawed his ears off to stop the hum. This was the road's hunger, the same force that had been feeding on people for decades, maybe centuries, along this cursed stretch of Route 66. And it wanted me next. The door groaned, splintering as something heavy slammed against it. I didn't wait to see what. I grabbed a crowbar from a shelf, left there from some long-forgotten repair, and swung at the wall, hoping to break through to the outside. The plaster cracked, but instead of revealing desert air, it opened into darkness, a void that pulsed with that same hum. A gust of cold, fetid air hit me, carrying whispers that weren't just names now but memories. Mine. My mother's voice begging me to come home. My brother laughing before he overdosed. My own voice screaming from a night I'd buried deep. The road knew me, knew everything, and it was using it to pull me in. I swung the crowbar again, desperate, and this time a chunk of wall fell away, revealing a tunnel. Not a maintenance crawl space, but something older, carved into the earth. Walls slick with that black tar and studded with bones, ribs, femurs, skulls, some still with scraps of flesh clinging to them. The stories were true. The tunnels under Route 66 weren't myth. They were real, and they were here beneath the last stop. I froze, the crowbar slipping from my hands as a sound came from the tunnel. A low, wet chuckle followed by footsteps, heavy and deliberate, climbing up toward me. The door behind me shattered, and I spun to see the shadow thing lurching in, its body now more liquid than solid, dripping onto the floor, reforming with every step. Its face was a mass of mouths now, each one whispering, screaming, laughing. "Join us," they said, voices blending into the hum. "The road keeps what it takes." I backed toward the tunnel, no choice left, and felt something cold brush my ankle, a bony hand reaching from the dark, nails scraping my skin. I screamed, kicking free, and ran into the tunnel, the crowbar dragging behind me. The walls pulsed, the hum so loud it felt like my skull was splitting. The air was thick, choking, and the ground was soft, like walking on rotting meat. My flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of the tunnel, bones embedded in the walls, some fresh, others ancient, and faces half-formed in the tar, watching me. One reached out, fingers brushing my arm, leaving a burning welt. I swung the crowbar, smashing it back, and heard a wet crunch like breaking a melon. The tunnel sloped downward, deeper into the earth, and I realized I wasn't escaping. I was being herded. The shadow thing was behind me, its dripping steps echoing, and ahead, the tunnel opened into a cavern, lit by a sickly red glow. I stumbled in, my flashlight dying, and saw it. A massive, pulsating mass of tar and flesh, studded with eyes and mouths, all staring, all screaming. It was the heart of the road, the thing that linked every story, every horror along Route 66. The pumps, the vanishings, the blood, it all led here to this thing that fed on fear, on lives, on pieces of those who passed through. I raised the crowbar, but the shadow thing grabbed me from behind, its grip cold and slick, burning through my shirt. "You can't fight it," the voices hissed, now inside my head, my chest, my blood. "You're already ours." The cavern pulsed, the mass swelling, and I felt it tugging at me. Not just my body, but my mind, pulling memories, fears, everything that made me me. I swung the crowbar one last time, not at the shadow, but at myself, aiming for my leg, hoping pain would snap me out of it. The metal bit into flesh, blood spraying, and for a moment, the hum faltered. I stumbled back, pain clearing my head, and ran, not toward the tunnel, but up, toward a faint crack of moonlight above. The shadow screamed, the cavern shaking, bones falling from the walls, but I kept climbing, clawing at the earth, my hands tearing on jagged rocks. I broke through, gasping, into the desert night, the last stop's neon sign flickering in the distance. The hum was quieter now, but still there, under my feet, waiting. I limped toward the station, blood soaking my leg, knowing I wasn't free. The road doesn't let go. The stories don't end. And as I reached the door, the bell chimed and I heard it again. Footsteps, slow and wet, coming from the dark. The neon sign of the last stop flickered like a dying heartbeat as I stumbled toward the door, my leg throbbing where the crowbar had bitten into flesh. Blood soaked my jeans, leaving a trail across the gravel that glistened under the moonlight, and the hum from the ground followed me. Softer now, but still there, a predator biding its time. The bell chimed as I pushed through the door, the sound sharp and wrong, like a warning I was too late to heed. My chest heaved, the air in the station thick with that same rot and gasoline stench, now laced with something sweeter, like overripe fruit left to fester. The stories of Route 66, the bleeding pumps, the tunnels, the customers who weren't human, weren't just linked anymore. They were alive, and I was trapped in their web, the latest thread in a tapestry of horror woven into the road itself. I limped behind the counter, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the first aid kit under the register. The lights flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking, and the hum pulsed through the floor, sinking with the pain in my leg. I tore open a bandage, but my fingers slipped in the blood, and as I pressed it to the wound, I noticed the skin around it was wrong, pale, almost gray, with thin black veins spiderwebbing out from the gash. It wasn't just a cut. Something from the tunnel, from that pulsating mass of flesh and tar, had gotten into me. The thought made my stomach lurch, bile burning my throat, but I swallowed it down. Panic wouldn't help. Nothing would help. The bell chimed again, and my head snapped up. The door hadn't moved, but the air shifted, growing colder, heavier. I grabbed the crowbar from where I'd dropped it, the metal slick with my own blood, and scanned the aisles. Nothing. Just empty shelves, a spilled bag of chips, and the flickering glow of the cooler in the back. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it, the same way you feel eyes on you in a dark room. The whispers started again, faint at first, curling out of the vents, the walls, the floor. They weren't just names now, they were mine, over and over, spoken in voices I recognized. My mother's, my brother's, my own, all twisted, mocking, hungry. I gripped the crowbar tighter and limped toward the bathroom, thinking I could lock myself in, buy time until dawn. The stories always said dawn was safe, that whatever haunted Route 66 retreated when the sun rose. I didn't know if I believed it, but it was all I had. The bathroom door creaked as I pushed it open, the fluorescent light inside stuttering to life. The mirror was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures radiating from the center, and the handprint I'd seen weeks ago, the one that wiped clean but left a sticky residue, was back, smeared across the glass in fresh blood. I froze, my reflection distorted in the cracks, my face pale, eyes sunken, the black veins from my leg now creeping up my neck, visible under my skin like ink spreading through water. Something moved behind me, reflected in the mirror. A flicker of shadow, too quick to track. I spun, crowbar raised, but the bathroom was empty. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the tiles, and the sink gurgled, a low, wet sound like a throat clearing. I backed toward the door, but the faucet sputtered, spraying not water but that same black tar, thick and viscous, splattering the sink and walls. It formed shapes again, fingers, eyes, a mouth that opened and closed, whispering my name. I swung the crowbar, shattering the sink, but the tar kept coming, pooling on the floor, reaching for my boots. I stumbled out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind me, and nearly tripped over something in the aisle. It was a shoe, a child's sneaker, scuffed and stained, laces undone. My stomach twisted as I remembered the kid in the pajamas, the one who'd dropped a tooth, his bruised arms and hollow voice. The road takes pieces, he'd said. I kicked the shoe away, but it rolled back, stopping at my feet like it had a mind of its own. The hum surged and the lights went out, plunging the station into darkness. My flashlight was gone, lost in the tunnel. So I fumbled for my phone, the screen's weak glow my only light. The shadows moved now, not just in my peripheral vision but everywhere, slinking along the walls, curling around the shelves. They weren't just shadows. They were solid, dripping, their edges jagged with teeth and claws. One reached for me, its touch cold and burning, and I swung the crowbar, hitting nothing but air. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices now, some begging, some laughing, all pulling at me, trying to drag me into whatever hell the road had birthed. I staggered toward the counter, my legs screaming with pain, the black veins pulsing in time with the hum. That's when I saw the security monitor flicker to life. Despite the power outage, the grainy feed showed the parking lot, the pumps still bleeding, pools of tar and flesh spreading across the concrete. But there was something else. Figures, dozens of them, standing just beyond the light, their shapes wrong, too tall, too thin, heads tilted at unnatural angles. They weren't moving, just watching, their eyes glowing like embers in the static. The feed cut to the inside of the station, and I saw myself on the screen, standing behind the counter, crowbar in hand. But I wasn't alone. Behind me, in the reflection of the glass door, was the kid, his bruised arms outstretched, his mouth open in a scream that showed no teeth, just a black void. I whipped around, but the station was empty. The monitor flickered again, now showing the tunnel, the cavern, that pulsating mass of flesh and eyes. It was moving, swelling, tendrils stretching toward the camera, and in the center a face formed. Mine, but wrong, eyes black, mouth stretched into a grin that split my cheeks to the ears. The whispers became a scream, and the screen went black. I dropped the crowbar, my hands shaking too hard to hold it, and ran for the door. The bell didn't chime this time. It screamed, a high, piercing wail that made my ears bleed. I pushed through, the desert air hitting me like a slap, and stumbled into the lot. The pumps were silent now, but the pools of tar had spread, forming a circle around the station, and in the center of each pool something moved. Hands, faces, bones, all rising and sinking like bodies in a swamp. The figures from the monitor were closer now, stepping into the neon light, their bodies dripping with that same tar, their faces shifting, becoming people I knew. My mother, my brother, the trucker, the kid. All twisted, their mouths moving in unison, chanting my name. I turned to run, but the ground beneath me shifted, the asphalt cracking, hands reaching up to grab my ankles. They were cold, bony, nails digging into my skin, and I fell, my face hitting the concrete. The hum was everywhere now, inside me, shaking my bones, and I felt it. The road pulling me down, claiming me like it had claimed all the others in the stories. The family in the van, the attendant with no ears, the customers who vanished. They were all here. In the tar, in the hum, in the things circling me now. I clawed at the ground, my fingers scraping raw, and managed to pull free, crawling toward the edge of the lot. The figures didn't chase me. They didn't need to. The road was alive, and it was everywhere. I reached the ditch at the edge of the property, collapsing into the sand, my leg burning, the black veins now crawling up my chest, my arms. I could feel them moving under my skin, spreading, connecting me to the thing in the tunnel, to the heart of Route 66. Headlights appeared in the distance, faint but growing closer. A car, maybe a truck, coming down the highway. The lights slowed, and I heard an engine cut off, doors opening, footsteps crunching on gravel. The hum grew louder, welcoming them, and as the figures stepped into the light, I saw their faces, blank, eyeless, mouths dripping tar. They weren't here to save me. They were here to feed. And the road, the stories, the last stop, they were all waiting for me to join them. The headlights cut through the desert night, their glare harsh against the inky blackness, but they offered no comfort. The hum pulsed beneath me, a living thing vibrating through the sand where I lay in the ditch, my body trembling, the black veins now curling up my chest, my throat, burning like fire under my skin. The last stop's neon sign flickered in the distance, its red glow casting long shadows that twisted into shapes, hands, faces, things that shouldn't exist. The figures from the car stepped closer, their eyeless faces dripping that tar-like sludge, mouths moving in unison, chanting my name in a chorus that blended with the whispers from the road. The stories of Route 66, the bleeding pumps, the tunnels, the vanished families, the fingernails in the asphalt, weren't just history. They were a promise, and I was the final word. I tried to crawl, my hands clawing at the dirt, but the black veins made my limbs heavy, sluggish, like the road itself was pulling me back. The pain in my leg where I'd struck it with the crowbar was gone, replaced by a cold numbness that spread outward, my skin graying, cracking like dry earth. I could feel it inside me, that thing from the tunnel, the pulsating mass of flesh and eyes weaving itself into my blood, my thoughts. It whispered now, not just my name but fragments of my life, moments I'd buried, fears I'd never spoken, all laid bare like meat on a butcher's block. The road knew me, and it wanted me whole. The figures stopped at the edge of the ditch, their forms shifting, melting into one another, sometimes human, sometimes not. One took the shape of the kid in the pajamas, his bruised arms dangling, toothless mouth gaping. Another became the trucker, his sunken cheek twitching with that writhing mass. They didn't speak, but their presence pressed against me, heavy, suffocating, like the air itself was turning to tar. Behind them, the station loomed, its windows dark, the pump silent but still leaking. Pools of black and red spreading across the lot, bubbling with shapes that screamed and sank. I dragged myself upright, My hands slick with sweat and blood, and stumbled toward the highway, the asphalt warm under my feet, pulsing with that endless hum. The figures didn't follow. They didn't need to. The road was everywhere, and I was already marked. The black veins reached my face now, curling around my jaw, my vision blurring as they crept toward my eyes. I could still see the car they'd come from, an old sedan parked crookedly across the lot, its doors open, interior dark. No driver, no passengers, just an empty shell. Like the family's van from the stories, the one found with teeth marks and blood-smeared seats. I staggered onto the highway, the white lines glowing faintly under the moon. And for a moment I thought I could run, escape, find another station, another town, anywhere but here. But the road stretched endlessly in both directions, a black ribbon cutting through the desert, and the hum grew louder, shaking the ground, cracking the asphalt. Hands broke through, bony and gray, fingers tipped with jagged nails grabbing at my ankles. I kicked free, my boots tearing, skin shredding, and ran, my breath ragged, the whispers now a scream inside my skull. The figures were behind me now, not running but gliding, their forms dissolving into the tar that oozed up from the cracks in the road. It spread faster, a flood of black and red, carrying bones, teeth, scraps of flesh that twitched and moaned. I saw faces in it, my mother's, my brother's, the customers I'd served, all twisted, their mouths begging me to join them. The stories were alive, every horror from Route 66 rising to claim me. The skinned man, the bleeding pumps, the attendant who clawed his ears off, the kids who lured others into the dark. They weren't separate events. They were one, a single hunger that fed on anyone foolish enough to stop here. I tripped, my knees hitting the asphalt, the impact sending a jolt through the black veins, making them pulse faster, hotter. The tar was close now, lapping at my feet, and I felt it, cold, alive, pulling me down. I clawed at the road, my nails splitting, blood mixing with the sludge, and saw something embedded in the asphalt. A ring, tarnished but familiar, one my brother wore before he died. I reached for it, tears burning my eyes, but the tar swallowed it, and a hand grabbed mine, not human but bone and sinew, its grip crushing. I screamed, thrashing. But more hands emerged, wrapping around my wrists, my legs, my throat. They pulled, and the road opened beneath me. A maw of black tar and writhing flesh, the hum now a roar that drowned out everything. I saw the cavern again, that pulsating mass, its eyes locked on me, its mouths grinning. And I knew it wasn't just under the last stop. It was the road itself, stretching across Route 66, connecting every station, every horror, every life it had taken. The hands dragged me down, the tar burning my skin, dissolving it, and I felt myself unraveling, my memories, my fears, my name, all feeding the thing below. But in that final moment, as my vision darkened, I saw something else. Headlights, distant but real, cutting through the night. A truck, its horn blaring, barreling toward me. The hands loosened, the tar recoiling, and I lunged upward, breaking free. My body hitting the asphalt as the truck screeched to a stop. The driver jumped out, an older man, grizzled, his face pale as he grabbed my arm. "What the hell's wrong with you?" he shouted, pulling me to my feet. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw, the black veins pulsing, my skin cracking like porcelain. He dragged me toward his truck, the hum fading slightly, the tar retreating into the cracks. "You're lucky I saw you," he said, shoving me into the passenger seat. "This stretch of 66 ain't safe after dark." I wanted to laugh, to scream, to tell him he had no idea, but my voice was gone. He started the engine, and as we pulled away, I looked back. The last stop was dark, the neon sign dead, the pump still, but the figures stood in the lot watching, their eyeless faces glowing in the moonlight. The tar pooled around them, and in it I saw my own reflection. Black veins, empty eyes, my mouth stretched into a grin I didn't recognize. The trucker didn't speak as we drove, his hands tight on the wheel, and I noticed his fingers, scarred, one nail missing, a faint black stain under the others. He glanced at me, his eyes too wide, too bright, and I realized he wasn't saving me. He was part of it, another link in the chain, delivering me to the next station, the next story. The hum returned, faint but growing, and the road stretched ahead, endless, alive, waiting. I don't know how long we drove, but the black veins kept spreading, my skin flaking away, my thoughts fragmenting. The trucker hummed a tune, low and familiar, the same rhythm as the road's pulse. I tried to open the door to jump, but my hands wouldn't move, my body no longer mine. The last thing I saw was a sign in the distance, another gas station, its neon flickering, its pumps glinting like teeth. The stories weren't over. They never would be. Route 66 doesn't let go, and neither does the thing that lives beneath it. I was part of it now. My name added to the whispers, my body another offering to the road's endless hunger. And as the truck slowed, the bell of the next station chimed, welcoming me home. That's all for today. Hope you can still sleep tonight. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for next story.